Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the medieval kitchen. Not the Instagrammable kind with wood-fired ovens and herb bundles artfully hanging from the beams. No, you're waking up in a time where food is not just a daily necessity. It's a gamble your bowels might not survive. The fire is cold, the room smells like wet wool and yesterday's onions, and the loaf on your table could double as a brick. Your first meal of the day? Bread. Not the warm, fluffy kind that makes you nostalgic for grandma's kitchen. This is yesterday's bread, or last week's. It's hard, it's dry, and there's something vaguely green blooming on the side. You chip off the mold with your fingernail, because that's considered good hygiene in your world, and chew slowly, hoping your molars hold out. They might not. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'll be curious to know where you're tuning in from tonight. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a peasant. Let's just own it. You don't own land. You don't own livestock. You definitely don't own a proper oven. Your day starts with leftovers, stale crusts dipped into weak broth, a cracked clay mug of ale that's flatter than your hopes, and if you're lucky, a wedge of cheese that smells like it's plotting against you. Breakfast isn't even considered a proper meal by most. In medieval England, some only had 2 meals a day, dinner around mid-morning and supper before sunset. So if you're gnawing on crusts at dawn, it's not because you're health conscious. It's because your stomach woke you up crying. And let's not forget the milk. Oh, sweet, deceptive milk. If you're close to a cow, you might have access to it. But that cow's been outside all night, and so has the bucket. Congratulations, you now have goat cheese in the making. Except it's not supposed to be goat cheese. You sniff, you sip, you regret. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were as poorly fed as the stereotypes suggest. Some claim they had more access to whole grains and fresh vegetables than modern diets. But most agree variety wasn't on the menu. You ate what you had when you had it, and you prayed to 3 saints that it wasn't spoiled. Quirky detail of the day? Some folks actually used bread as a bowl. These trenchers were thick slabs of stale bread placed under meat and sauce. After the meal, the juices would soak into the trencher, and the lucky poor might get to eat that afterward. So yes, your plate is food, your food is bad, and your dessert is probably just more bread. You step outside with your crust in hand. The village smells like mud and livestock. Your neighbor's got a turnip, and you're irrationally jealous. Turnips mean stew tonight. You've got dried peas. Again, you once tried growing onions in the corner of your garden. The goat ate them. The goat is now fine. You are not. You check your storage pit. Basically a hole in the ground covered with straw and prayers. Inside are a few roots, a knobbly carrot, and something that might have been an apple before it started mummifying itself. You consider eating it anyway. The fire in your hearth is a joke. The wood is damp. The smoke curls sideways into your face, and your cooking pot has a suspicious crack along the bottom. You boil water because it's safer than drinking it cold, and add the last of your barley. Tastes like nothing. Actually, it tastes like warm regret, but it fills the hole. You hear the church bell in the distance. Time for the Lord's tithe. Yes, even your sadness soup is taxed. You sigh and stir the pot with a stick that might have once been a spoon. And yet, you endure. You joke with your neighbor about the rat that stole her beans. You trade a heel of bread for a dried plum. You remember your grandmother's story about a feast with salt and fish and honeyed wine. You've never tasted honeyed wine. You don't even know if that's real. But the story helps. Food in medieval times wasn't just nourishment, it was a social compass. Bread ranked people. The rich ate fine white loaves made with sifted flour. The poor got coarse brown lumps full of bran and bits. And mold. So much mold. If you lived near a monastery, sometimes the monks gave alms, crumbs, leftover stew, maybe a slice of pie if God was feeling generous that day. But you don't live near a monastery. You live near mud and misery. Even your dreams are rationed. So you finish your crust. You wash it down with lukewarm ale. You wipe your hands on your tunic and wonder if tomorrow's loaf will be softer. It won't. Lunch, or rather, the closest thing you're allowed to call lunch, happens when the sun starts climbing and your stomach growls louder than the village pigs. You trudge back to your cottage, call it a break, but it's really just a pause between chores, and whatever food awaits you is less of a meal and more of an edible sigh. On the table, pottage. Again, you already know the texture before the spoon hits your mouth. Thick, gray, and clinging to the bowl like it's trying not to be eaten. Pottage is the lifeblood of your diet, made from whatever you could scrounge from your meager stores. Dried peas, leeks if you're lucky, wild herbs if the goat hasn't eaten them, and water. Lots of water. Historians still argue whether pottage offered enough nutrition to sustain a laboring body. Some suggest it was a clever, efficient way to stretch meager supplies. Others think it was a desperation dish, lacking essential proteins. Either way, it's what you're eating. Again and again. You stir it slowly, pretending there might be something different today. Maybe a scrap of bacon skin. Maybe a sliver of dried mushroom. But no. Same ingredients, same sadness. You sigh and take a bite. It's hot, at least. You'll give it that. There's a fleeting memory of taste. Onions, maybe? Or is that just the musty scent from your sleeve? Either way, your tongue is unimpressed. But hunger is persuasive. You eat. Across the table, your cousin slurps without shame. He's younger, hungrier, and hasn't yet learned the art of pretending food tastes better than it does. He makes a face. "This tastes like boiled shoe," he says. You can't argue. You just nod, chewing. Quirky tidbit? In some medieval kitchens, pottage was kept simmering for days, with new ingredients added as available. It was called perpetual stew, a pot that never truly emptied. Sounds poetic until you realize it's also a bacteria playground. You once saw a beetle float to the surface. You skimmed it off and kept stirring. You reach for bread to mop the bowl, but what's left is more crust than loaf. You dip it anyway. It dissolves slowly, then quickly, then turns to mush. Texture, defeated. In the noble houses, lunch might include roast duck, spice sauces, pies filled with actual meat. You've never seen a roast duck. You're not even sure what a duck looks like outside the margins of a Salter illustration. Your world is a blur of brown. Brown bread, brown pottage, brown clothes, brown mood. Sometimes, if a festival's coming, you get something different. Maybe a dried apple. Maybe lentils instead of peas. Once, on the feast day of Saint Apollonia, someone brought salted fish. You're still talking about that day. It was oily and you burped fish for 2 days. Best week of your life. But today is not a feast day. Today is don't complain or you'll get less day. You clear your bowl with a dull wooden spoon. The bottom is scorched, again, but the charring adds a kind of depth. Or maybe that's just what you tell yourself. Your cousin farts audibly and grins. "Blessed be the barley," he says. You laugh. Because what else can you do? It's either that or cry, and tears taste too much like salt. Something you don't have. You remember once tasting something sweet. Honey on oatcakes. A traveling merchant gave it to you when you helped him fix a cartwheel. You were 12. You thought it was magic. You still dream about it. That kind of memory sticks harder than porridge. Outside, the dogs scavenge for bones. You wonder if they'd eat pottage. You offer a spoonful to the scruffiest one. He sniffs it, sneezes, and walks away. Even the dog has standards. Back inside, the hearth spits smoke. You cough. The air is thick, and your eyes sting. You try to imagine the warmth of a proper kitchen, with pots bubbling and herbs hanging in bunches. But all you have is one pot, a burned stick, and a single sprig of something green that might be edible or not. You sniff it. Maybe it's parsley. Maybe it's roof moss. You toss it in. YOLO 14th century edition. You take another sip. Still mossy, but warm. A rooster crows outside. Midday. Time to go back to work. You scrape the bowl, lick the spoon, and hand it to your cousin to clean, meaning he licks it too. Sanitation is a luxury. Hunger is a greater force. As you step outside, the sun blinds you. It's hot. You'll be sweating within minutes. And guess what's for dinner? The same thing. Maybe thicker. Maybe thinner. Depends on whether you find more leaks. You smile weakly, the kind of smile that says, "I survived another bowl." You pat your stomach. It gurgles like it's plotting revenge. But you walk on, because that's what you do. Dinner. The word sounds hopeful, almost luxurious. Something warm, filling, maybe even slightly indulgent. But in your medieval village, dinner is not the candlelit climax of a day. It's the final negotiation between your stomach's low expectations and your pantry's even lower offerings. You return from the fields or whatever chore has owned your limbs for hours, your body aching in ways you don't even bother naming anymore. As you enter your cottage, the light is already fading. The hearth is faintly glowing, and someone stirred the pottage pot again. Of course they have. It's still the same meal from earlier, only now it's thicker, colder, and has possibly fermented slightly. Surprise. Tonight there's a twist. Someone caught a rabbit. A real, twitchy-nosed, unlucky rabbit. That's the kind of culinary event that shakes a peasant household to its muddy foundation. The entire family huddles as though royalty is visiting. You look down at the spindly haunch lying on a wooden board. It's tiny, more bone than meat, but oh, the possibilities. Historians still argue whether protein was truly that rare in peasant diets or if we over-romanticize the scarcity. Some say peasants ate more meat than nobles during certain feast periods. Others insist rural diets were dangerously low on calories and nutrients. Based on what's in your pot, you lean toward dangerously low. The rabbit is skinned, boiled, and tossed into the pot like a treasure chest of flavor. Unfortunately, it does little to change the gray sludge's personality. A few floating strands of meat swirl around the lentils like they're lost. You pretend not to notice. Your aunt mutters something about sharing evenly. You do the math. 1 rabbit, 6 mouths, 0 miracles. You ladle carefully. The first bite? It's meatish, tough, gamey, but undeniably different. You chew slowly, eyes closed, trying to stretch the moment. The warmth spreads, more psychological than nutritional. Someone sighs contentedly, and for one small second, the entire room breathes easier. Then comes the bread. Flat, dry, and cracked like an old shoe. Still, it's bread. You tear a hunk off and use it to wipe the bowl. It soaks in the rabbit-laced broth like a sponge absorbing dreams. It crumbles before reaching your mouth, but you collect the bits and stuff them in like contraband. Quirky fact: medieval bakers often added powdered beans or acorns to bulk up bread flour, especially during bad harvests. And sometimes they used ground chalk or clay. Yes, clay. So if your teeth feel gritty tonight, it might not be imagination. It might be geology. Your cousin tries to tell a joke to distract from chewing. "Why did the friar bless the stew twice?" he asks. No one answers. Because even God needed convincing. You all laugh. Too loud. Because laughter fills the space that used to be hunger. Then silence returns. The rushes on the floor rustle as someone shifts. A rat scurries beneath the bench. You don't react. Rats are part of the ambience. You once named one. He hasn't visited in a while. Probably moved to a nicer hovel. You drink water from a shared wooden cup. It tastes like smoke and wood and yesterday's onions. You swish it around anyway. Hydration is key even if the water might contain friends. Across the room, your grandmother is stirring something in a smaller pot. "Pudding," she says like it's a magic word. You blink. Dessert? Not quite. It's a barley mush with dried nettle and maybe a hint of honey scraped from the edge of a wax comb. It smells green, but it's warm, and it's different. You take a spoonful. It clings to your tongue like guilt, but ends in a whisper of sweetness. You close your eyes again. If you squint hard enough with your taste buds, it might be cake. You hear the wind picking up outside. The thatch roof groans. Someone tucks a blanket against the gap in the door. Dinner is done. Bowls are scraped, not washed. A dog licks the edges clean. You let him. He's doing his job. There's a strange satisfaction in being full, even if what fills you is mostly starch and water. Your body relaxes, knowing it won't go to bed hollow tonight. That's a win. You sit by the fire and listen to someone snore build in volume. It's rhythmic, like a lullaby sung by a bear. Tomorrow's food? Uncertain. The larder holds onions, turnips, a questionable egg, and hopes. But for now, you're warmish, fullish, and still here. That's enough. You wake before sunrise, the cold clinging to your fingers like a second skin. There's frost on the inside of the window slats, and your breath curls into the air like a ghost of better meals. Your stomach grumbles, not from hunger exactly, but from confusion. It's not sure whether to protest last night's gruel or dread this morning's lack of it. You fumble around in the dark, your hands searching the low shelf near the hearth for something. Anything edible. Your fingers close around a dried onion. It's soft. That's not a good sign. The fire has long gone out, so you coax it back to life using damp wood and a prayer. The flame sputters, protests, and finally agrees. You set a small pot of water to warm, toss in the onion, and cut off the suspicious parts. It's now half an onion. You consider adding salt, but you remember you don't have any. Salt, in medieval times, was a luxury. Not the little shaker on every table kind of luxury, but the people went to war over this kind. Historians still argue whether peasants had regular access to it or if it was hoarded for nobility, preserved meat, and, oddly enough, making cheese smell better. In your case, it's an expensive rumor. So your soup is onion-flavored water. Again, you stir slowly, hoping time might add flavor. Doesn't. You remember stories about salt caravans, about traders wrapped in wool with bags of salt on mules. You imagine waving them down, offering your shoes in exchange. Then you remember your shoes have holes. You sigh and sip the broth. It's warm. That's the best you can say. Not satisfying. Not tasty. Just not cold. You dip a crust into it. A crust you had hidden under a cloth to keep it soft. It didn't work. The crust resists like old leather. You chew until your jaw clicks. Breakfast of champions. Then someone knocks. It's your neighbor. He's caught a fish. Small, silver, and still twitching. He's proud. You're jealous. But here's the catch, literally. It's Friday, and that means no meat. The church has declared it a fast day. Again, which means that fish is fair game. But your neighbor is planning to smoke it and sell it to the manor kitchen. For coin. Real coin. You haven't seen coin in weeks. He offers you the fish head for broth. You accept like it's a blessing. Because it is. You drop the head into your pot, bones and all. The water darkens slightly. You close your eyes, breathe in the steam, and pretend you're on the coast of Normandy. The sea breeze, the salty tang, the roasted eel from the market. You've never been to Normandy, but pretending is free. You sip again. Better. Not great, but better. Quirky fact: some medieval communities preserved fish by packing them in honey. Sweet, sticky, and horrifyingly messy, but effective. You think about it now, watching the fish eye float to the top. You give it a poke. It stares back. You eat around it. Later that day, you help dig up more turnips. The ground is hard, the wind sharper. You stuff 3 into your sack and head home. Turnips aren't exciting, but they're honest. You respect that. Dinner is predictable. Turnip and fish head stew. You offer a silent prayer that the fish wasn't cursed. Probably wasn't. Probably. As you eat, you think about all the things food used to be. Not just fuel, but celebration, story, ritual. And now, it's survival. Barely. Still, something about the smell of roasted turnip makes you pause. It's earthy. Real. You suddenly remember your mother singing while stirring a pot. Some lullaby about beans and barley. You hum it now without meaning to. Outside, the dogs howl. Someone's burning something that's definitely not wood. The air smells like smoke and desperation. You sip slowly. The heat is good. Dinner ends. The pot is scraped. The hearth flickers. You rest your hands on your belly and think. Maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe someone will bring a carrot. Maybe the church will forget it's a fast day. Maybe the turnip will grow a flavor. Unlikely, but maybe. You'd think feast days would be different. And they are, just not in the way you hope. You wake to the sound of bells, distant and dull, barely making it over the frozen thatch and mud walls. Today is the feast of Saint Somebody. You've lost track, honestly, but what matters is this. The Lord's kitchen will be bustling, and you might just get a scrap if your timing, posture, and pleading eyes are right. Feast days are rare enough that your body forgets how to hope. You spend a little more time scrubbing your face with icy water from the barrel, patting down your frizzed hair, and brushing crumbs from your only tunic. You even try to straighten your belt. It doesn't help, but you try. The manor up the hill is already smoking. Roasting fires, not chimney fires, and the scent reaches your nose with maddening cruelty. Spices.
Actual spices.
Clove? Maybe cinnamon. You're not even sure what cinnamon is, but the stories say it smells like heaven and money. Historians still argue whether peasants ever participated in noble feasts or just smelled them from a respectful distance. In truth, it was both. If you were lucky or sneaky, or related to someone who worked in the scullery, you might end up with bones, crusts, or leftover wine-soaked pears that had been tasted and discarded. Fine by you. So you climb the hill, your breath fogging in the morning chill, your hands shoved into your sleeves. You pass the baker's boy, who's carrying a tray of flatbreads as if it were gold. You nod respectfully. He doesn't nod back. You linger outside the manor's side door. It's ajar. Steam pours out, thick and fragrant. Inside, chaos. Cooks yelling. Scullions scrubbing. A pig on a spit. A woman plucking feathers. You marvel at it like a peasant at a cathedral. Then someone sees you. It's Marta, the scullery maid. You owe her 3 favors and 1 secret. She eyes you, then tosses a half-eaten cheese tart in your direction. It hits the ground. You lunge before the dogs do. It's glorious. It's buttery. It's faintly sweet. You can't even taste the dirt. You savor every crumb, each flake of pastry dissolving like grace on your tongue. You thank her with your eyes. She's already gone. You sit on a frozen log and nibble like a noble. Across the path, a priest walks by with a chalice. You briefly consider mugging him, but you remember this is a feast day. Be holy. Feasts are for the rich, really. They eat meat wrapped in pastry, stewed fruits, honeyed almonds, roasted swan with saffron. You've seen the swan. It stared at you once, judged you. Then it was cooked. Justice. Your feast, however, involves watching other people chew. You wander back home. On the way, you see your neighbor trying to boil a turnip in rainwater. You give her half your tart crust. She cries. A little. You pretend not to notice.
Quirky detail?
Some nobles used pies not just as food but as entertainment. Hidden inside were live birds, frogs, even musicians. Until the crust was cut and surprise. Nature escapes. You try to imagine a pie with a pigeon popping out. You'd still eat it. By evening, the scent of goose fat hangs over the whole village. You mix your own feast. A thin vegetable stew with 1 blessed potato chunk. You chew slowly, reverently, because it's the closest thing you'll get to luxury this month. The kids ask what the Lord had today. You make something up. Roast dragon with plum sauce. They giggle. You let them believe it. Historians often debate whether medieval feasts were truly decadent or exaggerated in records. The truth likely lies in the middle, impressive but inflated. For you, even a wilted sprig of parsley would feel extravagant. You end the day watching firelight flicker across the wall. Someone's snoring. Someone's praying. You're just breathing. You curl under the blanket, your belly not quite full but not quite empty either. It's a feast of sorts. And tomorrow, back to turnips. Is market day or what passes for a market in your corner of the medieval world? You wake early, not out of excitement, but because the only vegetables worth selling were picked before dawn, and the best spot in the square goes to whoever arrives first. You sling your burlap sack over your shoulder, toss in 3 onions, 2 withered carrots, and a hope, then start the muddy trek to town. As you walk, the smells begin before the stalls are even in sight. Fresh manure, unwashed bodies, and somewhere, blessedly, fresh bread. You follow your nose, but bread costs coin and you don't have coin. You have a handful of eggs and a bartering smile. The square bustles with the usual chaos. A fishwife yelling about eels, a boy hawking shriveled apples, and a man selling exotic spices that suspiciously resemble crushed bark. There's a man juggling chickens. Badly. One escapes. He curses and runs. You laugh. Quietly, you find your stall, a blanket laid over hay, and arrange your vegetables with what you hope is artistic flair. Your neighbor, old Elsie, is already selling jars of something that smells fermented and probably is. She offers you a taste. You politely decline. Here, food is both commodity and currency. You don't just buy things, you trade. A cabbage for a slab of old cheese. A chicken feather pillow for a scoop of barley. An embarrassing poem for a bruised apple. That happened once. You were desperate. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were effective systems of exchange or chaotic free-for-alls. Based on the man attempting to trade his wife's comb for a dead rabbit, you lean toward chaotic. A baker shouts that he has extra loaves. You wander over, clutching your carrots like gold. He eyes them, shrugs, and offers you one small loaf in exchange. You nod. The loaf is warm, rough, and misshapen. It smells like ash and dreams. You carry it back like treasure. Then you see it. A merchant's cart, filled with bright things. Saffron, figs, dried oranges from Spain. You freeze. The color alone makes your heart race. You ask the price of one figure. He tells you. You nod, back away, and mumble something about maybe later. Back at your blanket, someone offers you a smoked herring for 2 onions. You hesitate. That herring could last days. You agree. He takes the best onion. Of course. You bite into the bread. It's dry but edible. That counts. Quirky fact? In some towns, bakers caught selling underweight loaves were publicly shamed, sometimes even forced to wear the bread collar. A giant wooden yoke with stale loaves nailed to it. You wonder if your baker's ever worn one. You chew suspiciously. The sun climbs. Flies gather. You sweat. By noon, your sack is lighter, your stomach fuller, and your fingers stained with leek. You've earned a modest haul. 1 turnip, half a cabbage, and a pinch of what might be thyme. You feel rich. Someone starts singing nearby. It's off-key but cheerful. You hum along. You pass the ale tent but don't go in. Too risky. 1 drink and you'll spend your entire trade value on pickled eggs and regret. You've seen it happen. As you head home, the market fades behind you. The sun warms your back. Your bag bounces with precious, if slightly soggy, produce. You smile. You didn't buy spice, or figure, or the bright orange from Spain. But you got a herring, and warm bread, and a day that didn't completely suck. That's the medieval version of winning. There's one thing no one tells you about food in medieval times. The smell is everything. Not the good kind, either. It's a war zone of smells. Overripe vegetables, stale grain, moldy cheese, and things better left unmentioned. And you live in the middle of it. You wake with a start. Something's gone off. Not just a bit sour off, more like growing a conscience off. You groggily stumble toward your food shelf, which is really just a plank on 2 stones, and begin the sniff test. First suspect, yesterday's cabbage. It's turned. Not deadly, but daring. You sigh and move to the bread. Still good. Miraculous. You set about making breakfast, which is an ambitious term for the act of chewing things until you feel less empty. You chop the good part of the cabbage and toss it into water. No salt, of course. The result is a faintly green, faintly offensive broth. As you sip it, you remember that someone in the next village once claimed to have eaten a spiced egg. Historians still argue whether spices like nutmeg and pepper ever reached peasant kitchens, or if that's just nobles rewriting cookbooks to feel more cultured. You lean toward fantasy. The egg was probably just moldy. You scrape out the pot and consider making cheese. You've heard of the process: curdle milk, strain the solids, age it. You have milk and something vaguely straining shaped. So why not? You warm the milk over the fire, then add vinegar. Nothing happens. You panic. Then magic. Curds form. Tiny, grainy clumps that vaguely resemble cottage cheese if you squint and lower your standards to ground level. You scoop it out and press it with a stone wrapped in cloth. It doesn't smell awful. That's a win. Quirky tidbit: some medieval cooks used nettles or thistles to curdle milk. You once tried it. Your hands still haven't forgiven you. You set your cheese to rest and clean the pot. A rat watches from the rafters. You glare. He stares back, unimpressed. This is kitchen now. Lunch rolls around and you revisit your experiment. The cheese is wet. It trembles slightly when poked. You bite it anyway. It's tangy. Maybe too tangy. Your jaw tightens. You blink rapidly. You chew, and finally swallow. It's not death, just disappointment. Still, it's protein. Sort of. You eat half, wrap the rest, and consider yourself nourished. Outside, the village is bustling. Someone's preparing a feast for the reeve again. Roasted goose, they say. The smell reaches your window. It hurts. You chew your homemade cheese and mutter, "Fancy goose." The rat agrees. Later, you try to hide the remaining cheese in a clay pot. You find mold already forming. Blue, fuzzy, a new species. You name it regret. But you keep it. Who knows, maybe mold is good. Maybe you've invented medieval brie. Or a disease. By evening, the stench of your kitchen has evolved. You light dried rosemary to cover it. The smoke chokes the air. Your eyes water. The smell of failure mingles with hope. You fall asleep hungryish, but proud. You made cheese, sort of, and you didn't die. Tomorrow, maybe you'll try making vinegar. Your first thought as you wake up isn't about food. It's about thirst. Your mouth feels like it's been stuffed with straw and regret. You reach for the bucket of water beside your cot, only to remember that yesterday's bucket became home to a drowned beetle and a layer of mystery scum. You groan. Water in the medieval world is not your friend. The suspicious at best, deadly at worst. You know where it comes from. The same stream where the cows wade, the pigs wallow, and your neighbor dumps her laundry suds. Historians still argue whether most peasants had consistent access to clean drinking water, or if they lived in a perpetual state of mild poisoning. You've made peace with the latter. So instead of water, you do what everyone does. You drink ale.
Wikale.
Small beer, they call it, barely fermented, barely alcoholic, but boiled, which means safer. It's cloudy, tastes like fermented barley sadness, and makes your stomach burble like a disgruntled cat. But it won't kill you. Usually. You sip it now, cold and flat from a wooden cup, trying not to think about the dead spider you fished out of the barrel last week. You try not to think about anything, really. It's morning. Your body is already budgeting energy for walking, digging, and pretending your back doesn't feel like it was trampled by an ox cart. You remember a time you had fresh milk. It was warm from the goat and slightly frothy, and for a brief, foolish moment, you thought you'd stumbled onto something decadent. Then you got sick for 2 days. Lesson learned. Unless you're boiling it into porridge, milk is best left to the animals. Later, you help draw water from the communal well. It's not too deep, but it's dark and echoing and always smells faintly metallic. A child once dropped a toy into it, and now everyone swears the water has a hint of wax and old wool. You try not to think about that either. You fill your jug and carry it home carefully. You'll boil it later, of course, twice, just in case the beetle's cousin is floating under the surface. Quirky tidbit: in some parts of Europe, people flavored their ale with herbs like yarrow or bog myrtle instead of hops. You once tried bog myrtle ale at a fair. Tasted like regret and pine cones. You didn't finish it. At midday, you sit with your neighbor under the shade of a half-dead tree and pass around a jug of weak cider. The slightly fizzy and wildly inconsistent in taste. One sip is sweet. The next tastes like someone dropped a turnip in it. You don't mind. It's wet. She talks about her cousin in the next village who drinks wine on Sundays. You both laugh. Wine is for priests and plague doctors, people who either lie for a living or don't expect to live long. When evening comes, you boil more water for soup, drop in a handful of dried herbs, and pretend it's nourishing. It's not, but the warmth is something. You hear someone down the lane gagging bad cider, maybe, or yesterday's cheese, or both. You mutter a prayer just in case. Then take another sip of ale, lukewarm and lumpy. The irony isn't lost on you. In a world full of rivers and rain, you live in constant thirst. But you've learned to make do. You've learned to drink carefully, boil everything, and never, ever trust a jug that smells sweet. Tomorrow, maybe the water will be better. Or maybe you'll risk tea. if you can steal a dried leaf from the herb cart. For now, you settle into your straw bed, a mug of small beer on the floor beside you, and drift off to sleep listening to the distant sound of someone cursing their well. There's something poetic, if depressing, about the fact that everything you eat was grown, caught, or butchered within a day's walk, and still tastes like nothing. Local food in your world doesn't mean fresh. It means what hasn't rotted. Yet, you're out in the field this morning checking traps. Nothing fancy, just a few loops of cord near the hedge and a pit trap you dug last week that has so far caught one very confused toad and your neighbor's chicken. That was a tense conversation. Today, you're hoping for rabbit, or anything that moves slower than hunger. Your stomach grumbles. You take out a crust of bread saved from yesterday, hard as roof tile. You gnaw on it like a dog with a bone. Tastes like ash, straw, and desperate optimism. Fresh food? That's a fantasy. By the time anything hits your plate, it's been dried, salted, smoked, or sun-wilted to oblivion. The market tomatoes are mealy, the turnips, rubbery, and that fresh duck last week? You could still see where the feathers used to be, only because they were stuck in the skin. You finally spot movement in the underbrush. A hare? No, just a squirrel mocking you. You mutter a curse and throw a rock. It laughs. At least it feels like it does. Historians still argue whether the average peasant diet had enough nutritional variety to avoid scurvy, rickets, and other medieval hits. Judging by the bend in your neighbor's spine and the color of your own fingernails? Probably not. You return to your garden. Garden is generous. It's a patch of tired dirt and angry carrots. They grow twisted like they've seen things. You dig up a few. They bite back. You rinse them in a bucket and count that as lunch prep. Quirky tidbit? Some peasants used to hang onions in their doorways, not just to dry, but as a form of pest deterrent and, oddly, as a charm against illness. You once wore one around your neck during a fever. You still don't know if it worked, but no one sat next to you for days. Inside, you slice the carrots, boil them with yesterday's leftover leek water, and throw in a sprig of something that smells vaguely edible. You call it stew. You serve it to your siblings with the seriousness of a royal feast. The youngest makes a face. It tastes like sadness. You nod. That means it's working. Even meat, when you manage to get it, needs help. You remember a dried sausage you traded for once. Hard as a cudgel, with a tang that suggested, maybe this was pork. You didn't ask. You just ate it slowly over 4 days and considered it the highlight of your month. Dinner comes and goes. You chew with determination, if not joy. You scrape the pot, hide the remaining crust, and pretend you're full. Outside, a traveling merchant sets up camp. He's boiling something fragrant, something exotic. You swear it's garlic and lentils. You hover nearby, hoping he'll drop a scrap. He doesn't, but he sings, a bawdy song about a man and his goat. You laugh. It helps. You crawl into bed with the taste of overcooked carrot still in your mouth, wondering if squirrels are edible. Probably. You'll look it up, if anyone in town ever invents books. Tomorrow, maybe the trap will catch something. Maybe the onions will grow straighter. Or maybe you'll just figure out how to trick your taste buds into pretending again. After all, in the medieval world, freshness is just another word for not spoiled enough to kill you. By now, you've probably noticed a trend. Your meals are more about survival than satisfaction. But tonight, oh tonight, you're invited to a wedding feast, and that means actual food. Sort of. You arrive at the bride's family home just as the sun sets, casting long shadows over the thatched roofs and smoke-streaked skies. There's music, roughly played, enthusiastically off-key, and laughter. It smells like stew, meat, and maybe something fried. Your stomach growls in response, louder than the fiddles. Weddings in your world are less Pinterest and more pit roast. The whole village is invited, partly because no one has doors strong enough to keep anyone out. There's a long trestle table made from 2 planks and 4 uneven barrels. Someone's decorated it with dried herbs and 3 squashed flowers. It's perfect. You take a seat and eye the spread. Barley pottage, a heap of boiled turnips, 2 scrawny chickens, already mostly picked clean, and what appears to be a communal loaf of dark bread hard enough to double as roofing tile. Still, it's a feast. A pig's head stares at you from the center of the table, apple in mouth, eyes long gone. You don't care. You'd kiss it if it meant getting some of that crispy ear. You grab a wooden bowl and wait your turn. The line is long and slow, and you know the stew at the end is mostly hot water and imagination. Still, you inch forward, bowl in hand, heart cautiously hopeful. Historians still argue whether village feasts genuinely brought communities together or simply reinforced the social hierarchies, with the lord and his entourage gorging on swan while the serfs shared cabbage water. You'd say, a little of both. Finally, it's your turn. You're handed a scoop of pottage, half a turnip, and a precious slice of chicken leg that might be meat, might be bone. You don't ask questions. You sit down and start eating before someone changes their mind. The barley is chewy. The turnip is resilient. The chicken, though, is glorious, tender, greasy, possibly undercooked. You inhale it with reverence and do not apologize. Someone passes around a jug of ale, the stronger than usual. You sip carefully. You're not here to dance with the pigs in the moonlight. Not tonight. Quirky fact: at some weddings, the bride and groom were expected to taste bride ale, a special beer brewed for the occasion, often sold to guests to fund the celebration. You once drank such a brew. Tasted like bitter hope and burnt time. This one's better. After the meal comes the dancing. You try. Badly. You stomp and flail and laugh harder than you have in weeks. Someone grabs your hand. You twirl. It's clumsy, beautiful, ridiculous. The kind of joy you bottle and save for winter. Later, you sit by the fire with your bowl, scraping the last traces of stew from the wood. You let your fingers soak up the warmth. Someone sings a song about a milkmaid and a mischievous fox. You know all the words. You lie back, staring at the stars through the smoke. Your belly is warm, not full, but not empty. A rare feeling. Tomorrow will be back to onions and regrets. But tonight you ate like royalty. Slightly underpaid, cabbage-fed royalty, but royalty all the same. The morning after a feast hits differently when you're medieval. You don't wake up hungover, you wake up suspicious. Your stomach's making sounds that would worry a modern plumber. Was it the turnip? The ale? That second bite of suspicious chicken? You'll never know. But you do know one thing. You're not venturing far from the latrine today. Still, life waits for no gastrointestinal rebellion. You're off to help the miller, because your family traded 3 sacks of last year's rye for some milling time. The walk is long, the sack is heavy, and the sun is already too enthusiastic for your liking. As you reach the mill, the clattering sound of the water wheel greets you like an old friend with boundary issues. The miller nods, already covered in flour dust. You haul your grain to the chute and watch as it disappears into the grinding stones. Huge, slow-moving teeth that chew centuries into powder. Flour, glorious flour. It's your ticket to edible food, but only if you use it wisely. You've learned the hard way that not all bread is created equal. Some loaves emerge like clouds, fluffy and holy. Others emerge like bricks, dense, dark, and ideal for self-defense. The miller hands you a sack of fresh flour. It smells faintly nutty, warm from the stones. You cradle it like a baby, then sling it over your shoulder and start the journey home. Your legs hate you. Historians still argue whether medieval milling techniques truly preserved the nutritional value of grain or stripped it bare. All you know is, this flour doesn't have weevils. Yet, and that's a win. Back home, you light the oven. Not the sleek steel kind. This is a dome of clay that's half chimney, half unpredictable dragon. You build the fire, wait for the walls to heat, then sweep out the ash with a bundle of wet hay. It smells like burning regret. Next comes the dough. You mix flour, water, and a touch of sour starter that's been passed down longer than your family name. It bubbles suspiciously. You knead. You rest. You wait. And wait. Bread making is less a recipe and more a therapy session, slow, repetitive, slightly futile. You form the loaves, slap them onto a peel, and slide them in.
No timers, no thermometers.
Just vibes. You sit outside while it bakes, watching the smoke drift lazily into the sky. A neighbor's goat wanders over and eyes your sack of leftover flour. You eye him back. This is a silent war. Eventually, you retrieve the loaves. Two are beautiful, golden and crusty. One not so much, sunken in the middle and somehow both damp and scorched. You name it the sad one and vow to eat it yourself. Quirky tidbit? Some villagers marked their loaves with a personal symbol before baking them in a communal oven. You once carved a tiny fish into your dough. The baker mistook it for a boot. It was not your finest hour. Dinner is bread, with a smear of something vaguely resembling butter. You chew slowly, letting each bite fill more than your mouth, your soul, even. Or maybe that's just indigestion from the feast. Still, there's something magical about homemade bread. It's the one food you trust. The one food you can craft, touch, control. Even if it sometimes bites back. You save one loaf for tomorrow. Hide it in the rafters, just in case the goat wins the war. You wake up with crumbs on your face and a suspicious squeaking overhead. Your eyes snap open just in time to see a mouse retreating from the rafter with what used to be the corner of your precious loaf. You sit up slowly. The betrayal is personal. Breakfast is now slightly smaller. You eat what's left, chewing around the teeth marks and sigh. Today, you're expected to help prepare a religious meal. It's a fasting day, which means the food must be penitently bland, as if God can taste your sins through your soup. You trudge toward the church kitchen, passing the town's most pious baker who is trying to make fish-shaped loaves without actual fish. You nod solemnly. He's using poppy seeds for the eyes. Very creative, very spiritual. Inside the makeshift kitchen, the air smells of onions, leeks, and sanctity. The priest greets you with a nod and a spoon, and you're assigned to peel roots for pottage. You try not to sigh too loud. The holy soup is a staple of fasting life. No meat, no eggs, no joy. Historians still argue whether fasting days were truly about devotion or simply a clever economic buffer to stretch food stores. You suspect it was both. Less meat for the peasants meant more salted pork for the Lord's winter cellar. Divine providence, conveniently practical. You peel slowly, rhythmically, letting your mind wander. A friar across the room is chopping herbs with the speed of a man who's been exiled from the choir. The pot bubbles on the fire with the energy of a sermon. Loud, persistent, and not entirely pleasant. A child brings in a jug of almond milk. Not the silky supermarket kind. This is ground nuts and water squeezed through linen until it's vaguely white and extremely gritty. It's considered luxurious, which makes you laugh. You've had river water with better texture. You stir it into the pot, careful not to spill. Everything is communal, everything watched. One priest lost his ladle privileges last Lent after too many taste tests. He's now on barley duty. Quirky tidbit? During Lent, even animal products like butter and cheese were forbidden in many places, leading to the invention of odd substitutes like fake eggs made of almond paste. You once bit into one thinking it was sweet. It was not. Your molars still hold a grudge. The soup is done by midday. You ladle it into bowls made from rough pottery and pass them out to the line of silent, shivering believers. Some are genuinely devout. Others, like you, are here for warmth and calories. You eat with them, spooning the lukewarm gruel into your mouth slowly, as if savoring penance. It tastes of boiled water and vague hope. Still, it's filling. Mostly. After the meal, you help scrub the pots. The priest gives you a dried fig as thanks. It's small, shriveled, and wildly sweet, like biting into history. You hide it in your pocket. Tonight, you'll eat it slowly. One bite per hour, maybe. It'll be the best part of your day. You walk home under a gray sky, the kind that promises either rain or divine judgment. You pass a boy chewing raw garlic like candy. He waves. You salute him back. Bold move. Dinner is cold bread and the last of your onion broth. You light a candle, unwrap the fig, and savor the sugar like it's gold. Maybe fasting isn't so bad, you think, licking your fingers. But then your stomach growls. Loudly, the mouse squeaks in reply. You glance at the ceiling. The war continues. You wake to church bells and the dull ache of persistent hunger. But today is different. Today the market arrives. You pull on your best, meaning least mended, tunic and head toward the square, clutching a few coins like they're holy relics. The air buzzes with activity. Carts creak, chickens squawk, and someone is already arguing about the price of eggs. The market is chaos, yes, but it's beautiful in its own unruly way. Baskets overflow with sad-looking apples, cheeses in every shade of beige, and dried fish that somehow smell both ancient and alive. You wander through the stalls, eyes wide and stomach whispering prayers. Your first stop, bread. Always bread. You eye the loaves suspiciously. One looks light and fluffy, too good to be true. You press a finger in and it stays dented. Nope. You buy the harder one and nod in satisfaction. Chew time equals mealtime. Economics. Then the fishmonger calls to you. He's got eels. Slippery, sinister eels writhing in a half-barrel of water like some biblical punishment. You back away politely. You're not that desperate. Instead, you spot a rare treat. A woman selling pickled cabbage and something she calls mustard greens. You ask how they taste. She shrugs. Better than dying. Sold. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were the lifeblood of rural nutrition or just a luxury for those with coin. You can say from experience, they're both. For peasants like you, they're a monthly gamble. Will you leave full or furious? You trade half your coins for a small cheese wheel. It's waxy, sour, and probably older than you. But it's cheese and that makes it fancy. You tuck it into your satchel like a treasure map. Then comes the meat stall. Flies hover. The butcher swats with a bored look. The cuts are mysterious. One might be goat. One might be mystery. You buy the one that looks least cursed. As a bonus, he throws in a chunk of suet. For the pot, he says. You nod like you know what that means. Later, you'll ask your neighbor. Quirky tidbit? Some medieval households kept ferrets. Not for fun, but to catch rats and help hunt rabbits. You once tried to borrow one for your trap line. It bit your ankle and ran off with your sock. You never asked again. Back home, you lay out your market hall like a royal banquet. Bread, cheese, mustard leaves, and that maybe meat. You start a fire, toss the greens into a pan with suet, and stir until they wilt into something aromatic and vaguely inspiring. The meat goes in next, with a pinch of the dried herbs you've been saving since Christmas. The pot sizzles. You beam. This is going to be edible, maybe even enjoyable. You eat slowly, chewing each bite like it owes you rent. The cheese is tangy. The greens spicy. The meat, surprisingly tender. You smile into your bowl. Then your sibling walks in and says, "Smells like you finally cooked something good." You nod. Don't get used to it. Later that evening, you wrap the leftover bread in cloth, stash the last cheese crumb in the coldest corner of the room, and feel rich. Tomorrow might be gruel again. But today was a feast. You fall asleep to the sound of wind and mice, with a stomach that, for once, doesn't complain. The wind outside howls like it's auditioning for a haunting, and your breath clouds the air indoors. You wake with a chill in your bones, the kind that makes your joints feel twice your age. Welcome to midwinter in a home with no insulation and floors colder than church gossip. This time of year, food isn't just scarce. It's strategic. You don't eat because you're hungry. You eat to delay the inevitable showdown between your body and the frost. Breakfast is a sliver of last week's bread, lightly toasted on the hearthstone if you're feeling decadent, which you are. You chew with the melancholy grace of a man about to go ice fishing in a pond that may or may not still be frozen. You're not fishing for sport, you're fishing for lunch. You bundle up in every layer you own. 2 tunics, a wool cloak, and 1 sock that's more whole than fabric, and shuffle toward the water. Your feet crunch over frozen mud. The pond glints under a weak sun like an old mirror, cracked, blurry, and full of secrets. You kneel and chip at the ice with a dull blade. Takes longer than it should. Eventually, you drop a line into the frigid water. You wait, and wish you had chosen a profession involving more fire. Historians still argue whether peasants supplemented their diets with enough wild fish to meaningfully alter their calorie intake. Judging by the smell of your boots and the numbness of your fingers, it's debatable. After hours of glorious failure, you catch something, a tiny fish barely longer than your thumb. It's thin, silver, and judging you. You thank it politely and add it to your pouch like it's gold. Back home, you warm up next to the fire. The fish goes into a pot with turnip scraps and a single clove of garlic you traded for a week ago. You add water, salt, precious, and hope, renewable. The smell that rises is sharp and strangely comforting. You serve it in small wooden bowls. Everyone sips like monks at communion. The broth is thin, but it's hot. The fish is mostly symbolic. Still, you feel fed. Not full, but no longer hollow. Quirky tidbit? Some winter stews included beer or vinegar to mask spoilage. One of your cousins once made a sour ale soup so acidic it cleaned the inside of a cauldron better than scrubbing. You tasted it once. Your tongue still recoils at the memory. After the meal, you scrape the pot clean, not out of neatness but necessity. Every calorie counts. Even the burned bits. You chew those too. The wind picks up again, rattling the shutters. You place a stone on the breadcloth to keep it from flying off. The mice have grown bold in the cold. One sits openly by the fire. You nod. He nods. There's an understanding now. Night comes early. You climb into bed wearing every layer you've got, arms wrapped around your belly like armor. You dream of soup with chunks, of bread with flavor, of cheese that doesn't cry when cut. Tomorrow you'll try again. There's still half a jar of pickled roots, still a heel of stale bread, still enough time to pretend this winter will pass with your sanity intact. And if not, you've got garlic breath and a battle-hardened mouse army. The last day of the month arrives with the gentleness of a falling anvil. You roll out of bed groaning like a haunted door. Your joints protest. Your back mutters something rude. Your stomach, your ever-hopeful, ever-foolish stomach, growls as if it forgot the last 2 weeks entirely. But today, there's a rumor. The Lord Steward is distributing alms. Now, alms in your world aren't shiny coins or miraculous loaves of bread. They're more like surprises. Sometimes a sack of barley, sometimes a wedge of old cheese, sometimes a handful of dried peas that look like they've already lived one full life. But still, it's something. And something beats nothing. You march toward the manor's outer yard, past the half-frozen duck pond and the huddled beggars in cloaks made of dreams and despair. The steward is there, surrounded by sacks, his expression somewhere between bored and mildly judgmental. You wait your turn, rehearsing your humble nod and your "bless you, good sir." The man ahead of you gets a smoked herring and a thump on the shoulder. You get a wrinkled turnip and a chunk of black bread that smells like a fireplace. You thank him like he handed you a crown. Historians still argue whether alms were genuine charity or a calculated method of social control. From where you stand, gnawing on what might be last autumn's beet, you're leaning toward the latter. Still, you make the most of your haul. At home, you slice the turnip thin, fry it in animal fat saved from 2 weeks ago, and pretend it's chips. You soak the bread in hot water and call it stew. If you squint while eating, it almost works. The children in the house clap like it's a festival. Someone sings. You join in, tapping rhythm on a wooden spoon. This somehow feels like wealth. Quirky tidbit? Some manor lords distributed soul cakes on All Souls' Day, baked offerings to be eaten by the poor in exchange for prayers for the dead. You once ate for and mumbled names until your jaw hurt. Whether the dead appreciated it remains unknown. You go to bed with the rare luxury of a warm belly and the even rarer feeling of dignity intact. You didn't beg, barter, or sneak. You received. You cooked. You shared. Outside, the wind has calmed. Inside, you lie still, listening to the crackle of fire and the gentle snore of your neighbor's cow through the wall. The mouse from earlier curls near your foot like a tiny living slipper. You don't move him. He earned it. Your eyes grow heavy, your breath slows, and for a moment, you forget the cold, the hunger, and the fact that tomorrow, the struggle begins again. You just sleep. Wind down, 300 words. And now, as you lie there, drifting at the edge of sleep, let the sounds of the medieval world fade. The clatter of wooden bowls, the creak of the windmill, the hiss of steam from a cooking pot, all slipping softly into memory. Your belly may not be full, but it's quiet for now. Your hands might be sore, but they did enough. You've stirred, chopped, shared, and survived another day in a world that asks so much and gives so little. And yet, somehow, in the spaces between hardship, joy still flickers, like a hearth fire that refuses to die. Feel the rough wool blanket against your skin, the chill night air curling gently at your toes, the hush that settles after even the busiest of days. Imagine the candle burning low beside you, casting flickering shadows on walls that have stood for centuries. You are still. You are safe. And for tonight, that's enough. Let the soft hum of sleep carry you away, past the stone ovens and cabbage plots, over frosted fields and smoky rooftops, beyond the hunger and the hardship. Let your mind wander toward dreams where bread is always fresh, stew always warm, and every table set just for you. You've earned this rest. You've walked the roads, waited in lines, cooked with little and given much. And in the world of peasants and lords, famine and feast, you've held your place. So breathe deeply. Let your muscles relax. Let the story settle in your bones like warm broth on a cold night. You've made it. Sleep well, traveler of time.